that I tell anybody who's like just getting into it or just getting started or like wants to get into it. And it's all about how to get better, how to become a sculptor, how to just improve your skill level, or if you're just getting into it just to, jump into this pool. And really the way that it's all about speed and repetition. That's what it's all about. One of the things that drives me crazy is when I hear people say, oh, you've got, this, somebody will say like, you're so talented, or you've got this God-given talent, or you've got, just something like that. And I don't buy into that at all. I really, really don't. Some people may take to things quicker than others, but to me, it's all about practice, everything. Anything you do, all of you do something well, and it's all because you practice or you've worked at it hard, you've done it for a long time. Sculpting is the exact same way. I've gotten to the point that I'm at, and I forgot to bring my one. I have my first sculpt, and oh, you know what? It's behind, Gannon's got it, behind the table. Can you go get it? Go get the rabbit for me. Go get it, go. So, I was going to play the diva up here, and I was going to like start ordering them around and like throw my drink and be like, go get me the right drink. So anyway, I'm going to show you guys like my first sculpt, just to show you that my very first sculpt that I did, and I did it when I was like in my 20s, and I was super proud of it. And if any of you have been over by my table, you can see like the big Conan and the gorilla that I've got sitting on the table. I went from, you have to remember, I went from this rabbit that you're going to see in my 20s to this Conan the gorilla. This rabbit in my 20s, anybody can do. And I was just, when I was done, I was like, oh, this is the best. I was like, I'm definitely going to get professional work from this. And, but again, I got to that point because, oh, here it is. Okay, so I'm going to, so this is it, but I'm gonna show you here so you can see. Okay. Now again, this is not done by a kid. This is done by a 25-year-old adult or semi-adult. I mean, and you see the detail on the hands? Look at how much detail I put into those hands. I mean, this is really top-level skill here. Again, that's what I like people to keep in mind, is don't say that you can't do it. Don't say that like, I've got no skill, no abilities. This was my skill and my abilities when I thought I was awesome. So really what happened is I did that, and it all started with me going into a comic book shop, and I saw some statue, and I was like, that's cool, and I read somewhere that they had done it like in Sculpting, and I found some Sculpting, and this is like in the 90s. And I grabbed some, and I started making little things like that, like for my family and friends. And the next decent thing I did was I made my wedding cake topper for my wife's wedding in 2000. And it was me as a knight in shining armor, and she was a princess, and it was really cool. And at the time, so I did that, and that was it. And I kind of put that aside, we put it on the shelf, and I really didn't do any other sculpting besides that. And then I had a graphic design business with my partner, Gannon, that I'm here with now. And we were doing that, and I was just getting really burnt out on being on the computer and stuff. And my wife saw that there was a wedding convention in Baltimore. And she said, well, why don't we see if you can do some wedding cake toppers? And I hadn't even considered it. And so there was only a week, and I called. We got like the last little corner. Somebody had dropped out. There was a corner little table. I went to Kinko's. I got like business cards printed up real quick, and the business cards were filled with like 100 words, like amazing wedding cake topper sculptor that you can get on your own, and they're and it was real. And I got some banner printed out at Kinko's, so it was just and it was one statue, like it's just sitting in the table, one statue, and I got mobbed. I had more people at my table than like at this whole wedding convention, like almost anybody else. It was just this concept that nobody had seen before. And so I started off, I started doing that. I started taking jobs. I stopped doing the graphic design, and for about a little over 3 years, all I did was wedding cake toppers. And I did a custom wedding cake topper. People would send me their photos. I would do them in whatever position. I did like a karate couple where she's flipping him over her shoulder. I did like, all sorts of like anything that they wanted with their faces. I did that for about 3 years. And I did just about one brand new wedding cake topper a week. Now, that was my boot camp. If I do a commission for somebody and I do a Hulk, if the deadline is July and I'm off a week or two or something like that, it's no big deal. They're sort of like, well, you said, this, but it's no big deal. If I miss a deadline on a wedding cake, they get their money back. I mean, there's no missing those deadlines. So for over 3 years, I never missed a deadline. Now, I killed myself. I made tons of like speed runs to FedEx, like, you know, just to barely get it there. And I would say more than half of my wedding cake toppers were, well, not even more than half, all of them were shipped out next day because I never wanted them to be in transit for too long. But I shipped all over the world. I sent them to Italy, to France, Australia. I literally shipped all over the world. I started off charging $500 for a custom wedding cake topper, and by the time I stopped, I was charging over $2,500 for a wedding cake topper. So any of you that want to get into that, the business is really good. It's like, and the nice thing about weddings is that they're always going on. There's never a lack of weddings out there. But having to do that, if you think about that, 3.5 years, one new one almost every week, I didn't have a choice but to get good. I had to go fast. I had to like speed through. I couldn't be precious. New people, new sculptors, one of the biggest problems that they always have is they will start on a sculpt and they will work on that sculpt for a week, 2 weeks, a month, 2 months, 3 months, and you're trying to make it perfect. It will never be perfect. Every sculpt I have ever done, I have abandoned, which means that I get to a certain point and I'm like, that's good enough. I can't keep working on this. I've got to just go and move to the next one. And that's what's going to make you better, because anything you do this year, you will not like next year, and you will not like the next year, and you'll never, even the Conan Gorilla, I recognize it as a good piece and I'm proud of what I did, but I look at it now and I see tons of faults with it. There's all sorts of things I'm like, ugh. So you're never going to be fully satisfied. And if you sit there and you work on a sculpt for a long, long time, you're doing yourself a huge disservice. You need to, I always tell all my students and everything like that the number one thing that you need to invest in is clay. It's just clay. The tools, I make all my own tools. I haven't bought a new tool in 10 years. And again, like everybody who gets into sculpting, I was a tool junkie. Every time I'd go to the shows like this, I'd be like, oh, tools, and I'd buy and I just got drawers full of tools. Now I have a handful. And even this is more than I normally use. But these are all of my go-to tools. This is it. And I've probably got enough to fill this whole bucket. And, but I use regularly, maybe half of these. So, you get to the point, but I've made pretty much all of these. So, and that's one of the things that I've got, I'll show you all afterwards, but I've got a Patreon account where if you sign up for, I've got videos. I got like 14 hours of videos. We do like a live video meetup, and I show everybody how to make your own tools, how to make easy armatures, how to get through things quickly so that you can just get that practice in. So it's all about speed. And the other thing with the Patreon, that's the key thing about this, is that every other week we do a live video meetup with all the members. And what we'll do is it's 1 hour and we do a jam. I'll give you a subject, we do a jam. And you've only got that 1 hour to finish your jam. And what everybody does is when they sculpt, they kind of say they finish, and at the end of the hour I say, okay, time's up, show your sculpts. And we all show them online. And everybody's like, oh, this is terrible, I don't want to show it. I'm like, it's not about being good. It's about you're getting through it and you're teaching yourself not to be precious. You're not focusing on the little details. You're just focusing on the overall concept. And every single person who's been a part of that, you could see their improvement. We've got their pictures listed online on our forum, and you could see from the start of when we started this to now, you could see their improvement. And it's literally just, and some of them only come and sculpt that one time, because of their jobs or something, it's hard to find that time. But I keep telling them, when you're sitting at home, just sculpt, work on something, just have some clay, make yourself do something. Now, part of what pushes me is that this is my job. So if I'm not out there hustling, I'm not making money. For a lot of you, if this is your hobby, it's hard to do that because you don't have a client. You don't have somebody that is pushing you that you've got to get something done. So what you have to do is you have to set your own goals. You have to say, okay, I want to do this, and don't make it something super elaborate. Don't say, I want to make Superman fighting a giant robot on Krypton. You know, I mean, that's going to be something that you're going to end up spending 3 or 4 months on. And again, at the end of it, you're going to hate it next year. So come up with smaller things. I love doing little small pieces. My whole mini bust line in there, that's the inspiration for that, is that I wanted to build a big line. I wanted to make them simple, and it just didn't take a lot of time. So each one of those mini busts for the top part, it takes me a day or 2 max to sculpt those. Now part of that is because I've been doing this for a long time, so I can get through it a lot quicker than you guys. But if you guys do the same type of thing, whatever it is, come up with, say, I want to do, if you're really into animals, say, I want to do a whole line of just little dog heads, and practice little dog heads. If you've got like an anime that you really like, or if you've got comic books or monsters, anything like that, start doing small things and just crank through it, finish it, and you can do one of 2 things. You can either finish it, take some pictures, and then recycle the clay and do a new one, or you can go ahead and bake it, finish it, and get a little shelf going of all of your stuff so you can see from start to finish. And you'll have more fun, you'll be more satisfied with it. It's going to help you become a better sculptor, guaranteed. Like, you know, if you do that, and the more, whatever you put into it, that's what you're going to get out of it. And it's really true. So if you spend a lot of time, if you make yourself every day after work, you've got a hard job, you say, okay, at least, if you can't do it like every day, then just say for the week, I'm going to sit down for at least an hour and I'm just going to work on something fun. And don't do stuff, especially now, that you think other people are going to like but you're not going to like. One of the things I tell new people who are trying to break into the industry is, if you don't like the Hulk, don't do a Hulk sculpt and post it online. Because if it's really good, people are going to commission you for Hulk sculpts, and then that's all you're going to be doing. I said, so if you don't like it, don't put it out, like, keep it to yourself, put out the stuff that you enjoy. Sculpt the stuff that you enjoy. Don't try to do something that you're not really passionate about. Now, I plan on doing, I like everything. So like a lot of the things I'm doing besides superheroes and monsters is I want to do like a whole line of like just characters from TVs and movies, like the actual characters. I did a whole Lost line where it's characters from Lost. And the big guy, Jorge Garcia, who played Hurley, he saw it and he actually contacted me. And I've got pictures of him holding his little statue. And then he got one with Josh Galloway, who played Sawyer. And I got Sawyer holding his little statue. I love that whole thing too. So when I'm in my office, I've got a shelf filled with like a lot of unfinished stuff. But I get to it. It doesn't sit there forever. It doesn't just crumble away. I do get to it. But I'll start stuff, and then I'll be like, okay, good. I'll put that aside, and I'll start another one, and I'm moving. It's always that kind of like constant thing. And as far as commissions go and jobs, I've always got 5 or 6 things going on at the same time. It keeps me creatively fresh. It keeps me where I'm like, I don't get burned out on one thing. And that's the other problem, where if you're working on one project, you will get to the point where you just don't want to look at it anymore. You're sick of it. And again, you may focus on some details and be like, something's not right, and you can't figure it out, and it just frustrates you, and it puts you off the whole process of sculpting. Whereas if you sit down with some clay and you just have fun with it, and you just sculpt something, again, don't compare your sculpt to my sculpt. I mean, don't look at my sculpt and say like, oh, you know, Troy's way better than me. I mean, there's reasons that I might be better than you. It's because I've been doing it for a long time. I have to be good or else I'm not going to get work, you know, and you shouldn't be comparing anyway. It's not a contest, you know. And so when I've got other sculptors who contact me and they're looking for work, I recommend other sculptors all the time. I'm always pushing other guys because to me, there's plenty of work out there. I don't keep things secret. If somebody has a question about like how to make tools, how to do armatures, how to do anything, I've always been really, really open with my advice. One thing that I'm going to be doing too is I'm going to be doing an entire YouTube series that'll be available to everybody. And the difference between mine and everybody else's is when you go online and you see like a video sculpting tutorial, they're always like an hour long or something. These are going to be, every video is going to be 5 minutes long, and they're going to be cataloged, just tons. So you're going to be able to go and just say, okay, how does he do eyeballs again? And I'm going to have a section just on eyeballs. I'm going to have a section on like just hair. If it's something that takes a lot of time, like smoothing hair, I'll have it broken down into different segments so that when you're working on something, you can go and check, just do a quick reference, max 5 minutes for each video, and you'll be able to just blow through your sculpt. So you won't have to sit through an hour long of something or not get your question answered. So that's going to be like a really big, long, that's going to be something that probably is going to be out next year. But once it's up, like I said, it'll be available pretty much to everybody, and it should be a really good resource. My buddy Gannon, who's over there, he's an illustrator. He's always like, done illustration. We started like the business together. So he teaches, for the Patreon, he teaches illustration and drawing and stuff and how to become a better like artist. And I teach the sculpting part. He doesn't really sculpt, but he started getting in on the jams and stuff, and we kind of like, cross-pollinate. And he did, so the first two jams was a Frankenstein of your own version, not the movie one, but just your own version, and then a werewolf of your own version. And his first two jams, like when you see him, if you see him online, they're rough. I mean, they're really rough. They're like as beginner as you can be. But he took those and he put them up on the shelf, and he kept building up a shelf. And every time we talk, I'd say, hey, get back to, your werewolf was looking cool, add some more to it. He'd do a little bit more here and there. He would get all of his tips from me and stuff. And then he would just constantly keep working on like something. And so eventually, he finished up, like, he baked his Frankenstein, and I'll show over here so you can see, like, the point that he got to. And again, like I said, he's just a beginner. But I showed him, like, how to do the hair, I showed him how to smooth it out, and then he finished up his werewolf, and the same thing. With the werewolf, this is something where you would never look at his early sculpts. I keep moving on you. You never look at his early sculpts and say, wow, this guy's really got something. You would look at his early sculpts and be like, you should quit sculpting. Like, it's not anything. He didn't show any aptitude for sculpting. But he did what I kept saying. I kept telling him, keep at it. Go. Don't slow down. Just finish it up. And he wanted to do more with this werewolf and the Frankenstein, but he knew to say, I'm just going to bake it. And I said, good, bake it. Move on to the next one. Don't dwell on it. And now he's got these two great busts sitting up on his shelf, and he's going to be able to do much better in the next, 6 months, year, or whatever. But he's going to have these to show what he's done. So, like I said, you get aluminum wire, like for your armatures and stuff like that, from, like, say, an art store. And it comes in a little spool, and it could cost like $15, $20 for a little spool. Well, what I do is, I go to Lowe's or Home Depot, I go to the electrical section, they've got this big industrial cable that's this big around, and I buy a 4-foot strip about this long for like maybe $4, and I strip it, and I open it up, and there's about $100 worth of aluminum inside of there. And that's all of my aluminum wire, and it cost me $4 or $6, like for an insane amount of aluminum wire. That'll last me, a year or more. All of my tools. All my wood tools, I just look for, I'll either buy the tools that you buy pre-done in a bag in the store. For the class that I taught yesterday, I had Rob buy everybody this bag of just cheap art, like wood tools. And they're just terrible for sculpting with, but the wood is good. And I brought my Dremel, and I say, this is what I do. I buy these crap tools, and then I Dremel them down into the shape that I want, and I make all my own custom tools. I showed him how to get them like really smooth and stuff, but again, that little pack of tools costs $6, and you could make tools that like somebody would charge you custom-wise, like maybe $15, $20 per tool. All my other ones, my loop tools, these are all just brass rods and guitar strings that I make my loops with. As far as like my armature stands that I do my heads with. The wood, it's just, again, it's Home Depot and Lowe's. I buy like a plank, I cut it, dowel rods, I just do dowel rods, my aluminum wire, and then I use a ton of aluminum foil. When I'm doing a big sculpt like this, most of the sculpt on the inside is aluminum foil. I will almost sculpt the whole big body. If I'm doing like a Hulk, I'll sculpt, it'll look like almost like an aluminum foil Hulk, and then I'll skin it with the clay. And what that does is, this is a lot more expensive than this. And also when you're baking the Sculpey, the foil helps cook it from the inside. So you've got less chance of cracking, it's a lot lighter, but when I see guys like building up a sculpt with all of this, you're just wasting, I mean, one block of this, it depends on where you go to get it. If you get it online cheap, you can get it for maybe $8 a block. If you go to your store to buy it, it's probably $15 a block. Foil, $3 for a giant thing that'll last me like for an immense Hulk. You know, it's like, I like getting the cheap stuff, and you don't need to get the big expensive stuff. Again, that Conan and Gorilla, it was mostly aluminum foil on the inside of that. So, you know, these are all part of the things that like I teach on the class. I like to show new people and just, you know, kind of get people over the hump of where you get intimidated by not knowing where to start, or, you know, just getting going. But that's what I try to show. And yesterday at the class, I wanted to show everybody how easy it is just to make your armatures and then just go. Don't slow, don't think about it, don't overthink the process. Don't go online. Even the subject yesterday, I had everybody in the class make their version of the Jersey Devil. Now, the first thing is, for all the class, it was from 10 to 5. For almost the first half of the class, I didn't even tell them the subject. We didn't start working on the sculpt at all, because I wanted them to understand how to sculpt and like what are the materials and like what you need to do just to get started. Then when I finally gave them, almost halfway through the class, the subject matter and everybody started sculpting, by the end of the class, almost everybody was finished with their bust. And I was telling Gannon that I've taught another class, and in this one in particular, out of 20 people, there wasn't a stinker in the bunch. Like, you know, usually you might see somebody who's kind of like privately you would say, you know, they maybe should not be sculpting. Like maybe this isn't their thing because they're just not getting it. Every person who did a bust in there, I mean, did you see all of them? They were all like amazingly good. And it ranged from people who had never sculpted before to people who had like just done some sculpting. And I was really just blown away by how good they were. So Gannon said it was one of two things. That either they had a really amazing teacher or sculpting's just not that hard. So it's one of the two things. So it's taken a while. Yeah. So he's a slow learner. So anyway, so that's my whole point to anybody who's even halfway been interested in this. It's so totally worth getting into. It's fun. My daughter, she's 16. She's been sculpting. I mean, I've got buckets from when she was little, and she would just sculpt little things. And again, she didn't show any aptitude for it. Like when she started off, her little sculptures when she was 6 or 7 looked like every other 6 or 7-year-old sculptures. But because I've got buckets of them, she really improved, you know? And by the time like Coraline rolled around, she was doing little sculpts of like Coraline characters that were amazing. They were awesome. And now she does this whole little line of dragons, and like she's really, really good. It's all because, again, she practices. She's an artist, she's an illustrator. Her stuff now is better than my illustration, and that's all I did for like up to sculpting. I was just an illustrator, I did graphic design stuff. Her stuff now at 16 is better than when I was like almost 30. Like it's phenomenal, but it's because up on my shelf, I have like 20 or 30 sketchbooks of hers that are filled. She used to have a DeviantArt account. She had over 700 illustrations on DeviantArt because she just cranked. And I kept telling her, every time she focused on something, I'd say, you know, she'd be like, Dad, what do you think about this one? I was like, looks good, go, do the next one. Looks good, go, do the next one. Just keep doing that. So that's the number one thing that I would tell all of you today is just get in that mindset. Get your materials, get yourself set up, figure out like your little bit of time, and then go fast, do a bunch, you know, and don't be precious about your sculpts. Again, I see people who like something will happen to their sculpt and they'll get like really like, and they'll get very upset. You will get over that pretty fast. When I was doing wedding cake toppers, near the end of my wedding cake toppers, again, these are all one-of-a-kind, hand-done, custom wedding cake toppers that I hand-painted by myself. I stayed up the entire night one time. It had to go out, let's say, Friday by 5 o'clock. So I stayed up all Thursday night. It was Friday morning. I was going to take a picture and I tripped and it flew out of my hands and it like busted on the ground and like, you know, parts of it just, and okay, and I will be honest, for a solid hour, so okay, for the first 20 minutes I cried. I legitimately like just tears just pouring. I was in the basement by myself, nobody was around. It was tears like punctuated by just the worst obscenities you've ever heard in your life. Like just, I was screaming obscenities. Like my wife, like, oh, it would have been horrible. I was just so upset. And then finally after maybe, I don't know, it was maybe 40 minutes, I finally like dusted myself off, I picked it up, and I just glued everything back, and I sanded, and I painted, and I raced to FedEx, and I got it there in time, just barely. But it really taught me that just go, like even if something breaks. In there, once again, I keep going back to it, but the Conan and Gorilla, if somebody leaned out or if it broke or if something fell over, I'd be bummed because nobody wants their statue to be broken. But at this point now, I've done so many, I'm sort of like, it's fine, I can fix it. I'm not precious about really any of my sculpts. And you should be the same way. Don't look at it as your masterpiece. You should look at it as your whole collection that you're building. So you're not just doing one masterpiece. So, you know, nobody, Frank Frazetta was not that way. You know, he moved. I mean, one time, you know, just as an example, he had a deadline. It was super late. He waited last minute. He had no canvas to work on. So he ripped up like one of the floorboards from his house and he did his entire painting like on that. And he just said, screw it. And it was a Frank Frazetta. It was gorgeous, you know? So that's the whole thing. It's just like, you know, basically what I would say to you just to get going and get started and stuff. So I'm going to open up to any questions. Anybody have any questions or want to know anything?
You hit that dealer over a night.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. I know, he was crazy though. It was insane. But he was that way though. He wasn't precious about anything.
Or do you feel that sculpting, the sculpting career would be a lot more easier to break in than illustration?
It's really hard. It's super hard. Like
to the graphic design and illustration.
Graphic design, any art, if you're getting into art, I mean, it's difficult to make a career out of it. I mean, unless you've got like a boss telling you something, you have to hustle yourself. You got to be out there really, you know, trying to get business and going hard. I quit graphic design because there were so many people out there doing it, and there were so many people doing it so much better than me that, you know, and I didn't enjoy it. I didn't love it. The sculpting, I love the sculpting. Now, the only reason I quit the wedding cakes is because, or the toppers, is because I really didn't love wedding cakes and wedding cake toppers. You know, it was fun doing the portraits of the people, and it got me much better at portraits. It got me much better at like, you know, likenesses and stuff like that. Again, not great. You look at my beginning ones, they're horrible compared to now, like just terrible. But the people loved them at the time. They were very happy with them. But I quit that because I didn't love it. This stuff I love. I love monsters, superheroes. That's what I grew up on. So once I got into this, I've been doing this now since 2007 as a career, like no other job. I haven't had a 9-to-5 job since, I don't know, like Gann and I started our own business in 1999. So I haven't actually sat in an office and worked for somebody. But I'll tell you right now, it has not been easy, and I have not gotten rich. So either one, like neither one of those things has happened. But since I've been doing this since 2007, this type of stuff, I love it. I love it. And every single day, it really is the saying of, you know, find a job you love, you'll never work a day in your life. That's me, 100%. I have a studio downstairs. I wake up in the morning. I get my coffee. Well, I wake up in the afternoon. I don't go to bed until about 5 or 6. And then I wake up about 1 in the afternoon. So that's just my schedule. Between the late night hours, everybody's asleep, the kids are all in bed, but you know, it's no phones ringing, no dogs barking, so I really dig that time of night. I don't like waking up so late, but it's the trade-off. I go downstairs, I get in the studio, and then when I start working on this stuff, it's never like work for me. Even if I'm doing stuff for a client or a business or something like that, it's just, I love it. I've really found what I love. As far as like just breaking into it, right now, if you're looking to get into, if you want to become a sculptor or like work for any of the companies, Sideshow or anything like that, you have to learn digital. They're all just digital. It's just the way it is. And I'll tell everybody right now, I love digital. I'm not one of those people who's like, traditional is so much better than digital. My viewpoint is it's just another tool. It really is. Digital is another tool, and there is the difference between holding clay in your hands and sitting at a computer, so I give you that. I don't really want to sit at a computer and do it, but I think digital stuff is super cool, and it is the way of the future for companies and businesses. Just knowing for me, like Sideshow, if I did the Conan the Gorilla for Sideshow, and it's that giant thing, if they make a big change, if they say we need to move his arm, that's a week's worth of work for me, just to move his arm. If you're in digital, it's about 10 minutes. So for them, it just makes so much more sense. If my scale is off, if they look at my thing and they say like, oh, he's a little bit too big, I just have to start over. There's nothing I can do but start over. For digital, you just go, boop, you know, and I mean, and it's done. So if you ever are looking into getting in professionally, or like, you know, thinking in college class or something, traditional, there's still business out there, and I'm doing just fine, and I've got plenty of client commissions. I got plenty of, but I'm actually stopping client commissions altogether. I stopped taking them in January of 2016 because I'm getting to the point where I'm just going to do my own type of stuff. So if it's characters like Marvel and DC or something like that, I'm doing my own designs. I basically don't need somebody to come to me and say, hey, I want you to do a really cool Hulk. I'm like, yeah, I can do a cool Hulk on my own. I don't need somebody to kind of give me that direction. But I'm building up my own properties, and it's going to be something where I want to build up my own fan base, you know, and it'll be slow, and we've got a long plan figured out and stuff like that. It involves Kickstarters and Patreon and all this other stuff, but that's the way for me to go. If you're looking to make it as a career, what I would say is you can do it, but you're going to have to hustle, and you're going to have to figure out your specialty. So look around out there. If somebody is not doing really great cat sculptures and you love cats, start doing cat sculptures and put out cat sculptures. You'll get business. You know, if somebody wants, you know, newborn babies, you know, be the newborn baby sculptor, you know, whatever you're really into, but it's out there. You can totally get that business. If you don't want to do that, if you got an idea for a story or something like that, start sculpting your own characters and slowly build your fan base. You know, do something where it'll take a while. It's not fast, but you know, you will be able to turn it into something eventually. So, does that help? Yeah.
So when you do like a Marvel character or something that's name brand like that, do you run into any copyright issues?
Yeah, it's completely illegal. Yeah, it's 100% illegal. I tell everybody who comes up and looks at my minibus line, when they come up and look at my minibus line, they say like, you know, hey, are you gonna, like, how long are you gonna be doing this? And I say, until they send me a cease and desist notice. That's what I tell everybody. Like, once they send me a cease and desist notice, I'm done doing the Marvel and DC line. So the thing of it is with the Garage Kit, it's built on unlicensed illegal kits. This entire hobby is built on that. I mean, it really is. And the thing is most of the time, those big companies, if you're small, as long as I'm not taking ads out in People and saying like, hey, here's this cool Hulk bust, you know, and like really blatantly putting myself out there, then they generally are not going to come after me because they know that I'm a fan, I'm selling to fans, and it's not a good PR move for them to like kind of clamp down on me. Now they can, and they have before. I know sculptors where they've sent them cease and desist, and you know, certain properties like before Disney purchased them. Well, Disney was one, but Star Wars, LucasArts. If you did anything Star Wars, they had lawyers just patrolling like sharks, you know. So it is one of those things where this hobby, you're kind of under the radar, but you know, but that's one of the reasons why I'm slowly transitioning into our own properties. And we've got, Gannon and I, we have like 5 universes planned out. They're very different, they're all over the place, so it's not all of our eggs in one basket. It's kind of like spread out, and again, we've only been thinking about this since we've known each other in high school. So, you know, so this is our get rich quick scheme, you know. Mine and Gannon's inside joke is since high school, since we've known each other, every single year after the new year, January 1st, we call each other and we say, this is our year. This is it. This is it. Now, we've been doing that for what, 30 years, you know, but, you know, we know one year it'll be our year. So,
Did you have a traditional like grasp on anatomy before you started sculpting, or did you learn as you were going?
No, anatomy's super, super hard. And I can just tell you too, I failed art in high school. So, I mean, that's 100% true. I failed art in high school. A big part of that was because I just wasn't a good student and I didn't want to listen to my art teacher, and she wanted us to do certain things. I didn't want to do certain things. But, you know, things like anatomy and stuff like that, completely, and I didn't go to college, and again, that's not an encouragement not to go to college for either one of you two, so go to college. But I tell my kids, my daughter really wants to be an artist, but she loves science. We both love science. My big thing for her is I'm encouraging her, not pushing her, but I'm just encouraging her, which she's on board for. Get a science degree. You don't need an art degree. You do not need, there's two fields that you don't need degrees with, music and art, because your portfolio for your art is your degree, and for music, it's how good you play is your degree. Nobody, if you stink and you hand somebody a degree and say, I went to college for 4 years with an art degree, and your stuff sucks, you're not gonna get a job, you know? But me, I've made a full-time career out of this, and I'm a high school graduate, barely. So that's the other thing, is you do not need like a formal education. The only thing I would say, like in terms of art, is to go to college if you really are into that, is if you're into the digital side of it. Because then they've got the facilities and stuff like that. So you really, if you want to do like a game design, my son is really into that. He may go into like, you know, game design and stuff like that. You know, the college is really going to help you in terms of that. But if you're doing something like this, you know, so I'm pushing her, get the science degree and do the art on the side. And, you know, and she's huge into dinosaurs. And I always tell her, I say, go get, you know, your degree in, you know, microbiology and anything else that you want, like paleontology and all this other stuff. I says, but they always need, when they do a new discovery of a dinosaur, somebody's got to illustrate that new dinosaur. Somebody's got to make what it looks like. I said, so do that on the side. That could be your side thing. But I said, from your father who has struggled for 30 years making a career out of art, I said, believe me, get a full-time gig that you love, that you get health insurance, pays the bills, and then do the art on the side, you know? I said, but she also knows that if she does the art on the side, she has to take it very serious. Like, she has to focus on it. She can't do art one time a week or something. Like, she goes to her full-time job, I told her, you need to come home and work on your art, you know, otherwise, you know, you're never going to make anything of that either, so, you know. But anatomy's really, really hard. Anatomy is just on-the-job training, and what I did for anatomy is never be afraid to use reference. So don't try to just come up with things out of your head. If you're sculpting a wolf, don't just think, I know what a wolf looks like. To this day, every sculpt I pull up, when I did, I'm going to keep going back to it, so I apologize. Yesterday in the class, I kept going back to the Hulk. The Hulk was my reference. Today it's going to be the Conan and gorilla. When I did that, I had like 30 pictures up of gorillas, you know, and I constantly reference them. So really, tons of reference. Do not be afraid of it. Your piece is going to end up looking better if you've got like lots of reference. And anatomy, I'll not only look at that, I'll look at other sculptors. I'll look at guys that I really like. I'll look at, you know, I pull up all these pictures and I look at how did they do that? How do they do that? And I still can't tell you, besides the bicep, what the other muscles are. Like, I am not like,
as long
you know.
as you got the form.
And yeah, and basically my advice on anatomy is fake it till you make it. I mean, just, you know, just keep going, and if you put your bicep up here, then if somebody says, you know, the bicep's in the wrong place, then just correct it and fix it. But even that one, you should bake your sculpt with the bicep up here and put it on your shelf so you could look later and say, you know, now I know where that goes. So, anybody else?
So is your mindset any different when you attack somebody like a TV personality where you have to get the likeness now as opposed to a wolf where there might be interpretation?
Well, I'll tell you that it definitely takes a lot more time. So when I was doing commissions, if somebody came to me and they said that I want a Selena from Underworld, I would charge completely differently than if they said I want a female vampire. So if it's left up to me, it's going to take me a lot less time to do because I can do kind of my own interpretation. But if they want it based on a person, that automatically adds a significant amount of time because I have to pull up every picture of Kate Beckinsale that I could find from every different angle, and I have to nail that likeness, and especially something like that. Like if it's off, you know, people will know, and you don't want to spend a lot of time working on a likeness and then have your client be like, ugh, it doesn't really look like her. You know, now you're into a whole bad thing because the other part about this whole business is reputation. As much as I've tried to make my skill level really high, I've really, really been uber careful of my reputation. So I'm always polite, I'm always courteous, I'm always keep in touch with my clients. They never have to like try to track me down or they can't get a hold of me. I never give in with lame excuses like, I was sick or my mom was sick or like, oh, I'm sorry, my email wasn't working. Those are all, you have to be professional, you have to be polite, you have to be, anytime clients have come to me and they've said like, hey, we want to change this, I've always been like, my standard response, no problem. It's always my standard response. Now, if I've gotten a few very, very rare clients who have been like, they're basically at the buffet and they just keep going to the buffet. And after a certain point, I will say, okay, listen, just so you know, if I continue with this, I'm going to have to charge you more. 9 times out of 10, 9.9 times out of 10, they say like, oh, okay, it's good enough. And then they'll stop, like at that point. And I'm like, cool. I'm like, wins for you, wins for me, I do whatever it takes. I do not want to tarnish my reputation one bit. So just to give you an example of how extreme it is, like Randy Bowen, y'all know Randy Bowen. Okay, Randy Bowen, basically when I told him this story, he said, you're insane. He goes, I would never do that. I got a job for XM Studios to do this giant Planet Hulk sculpt. And so it's a big quarter scale, it's bigger than that Conan Gorilla, it's massive. And it had to be shipped in 2 big boxes to China. And one box showed up and the other box was in customs. And it got held up in customs. And then they couldn't find it. And it was gone for 5 months. It was lost. So we figured it was just gone. And they paid me far more money for that sculpt than I had ever been paid for any sculpt before. Basically, when I quoted them the sculpt, I wasn't taking clients anymore. I didn't want the job, so I quoted them a crazy price, and they came back and said, sure. And I was like, it was 3 o'clock in the morning, and I woke my wife up from bed, and I was like, you need to wake up. I was like, you're never gonna believe this. And then she couldn't get to sleep. So it was a big deal. When that thing was gone for 5 months, I contacted them, and I said, listen, if you guys will pay for the clay, because it's so big, I said, I'll sculpt the whole thing from scratch all over again. I said, I'll just do the entire thing, I'll start over, because I didn't want them to spend that kind of money and get nothing out of it. Like to basically just be stuck and be like, and me just step off and go like, hey, that's not my fault. Now, it would have sucked, it would have added a massive amount of work to my schedule, but I was willing to do it because, again, my reputation as being someone easy to work with and someone good to work with and someone, responsible and reliable and all of those things are more important than anything else. Good news is it showed up at my house 5 months later. The box came back. And so, it did come back. And when it came back, they basically said, hey, they were very happy. They were like, can we do a few more changes? I wrote back, no problem. And so I made some changes and then they paid me for the changes, which I didn't even ask for. But it was because I was so easy to work with. They knew that, I gave them no complaints. I was just always, very available and, so.
You mentioned eyes. Do you use forms or do you sculpt your eyes in?
Different ways. Like now, so the way that I used to do it is, what you can do is, I mostly work in Sculpting, so I've worked in a lot of different materials. Now with Sculpting, you can pre-bake your eyes, and so what I would do a long time ago is I would make like 100 eyes. I would just sit watch a TV and I would just roll little balls out, bake them on the tray, and then I'd have a whole little tray of eyes, and then when I did my sculpt, I would just push them in. I don't really do that anymore, but I always encourage new people to do that because, eyes are, like I was telling the class yesterday, when you're doing a sculpt, one of the things that I always tell people with sculpt is, think about the personality or the attitude of the character that you're sculpting. So there's nothing I hate more. If it's supposed to be a museum piece, so like some of my mini busts, they're just kind of looking straight ahead, but I wanted some of them to have just a classic museum look of like, that's just the character. But you'll almost never see me do that. All of my sculpts will almost always be doing something. Like their expression will be like they're scared or they're angry or they're like, they're confused. To me, adding the personality, it just tells a more interesting story. You look at the sculpt and you say like, oh, what's he mad at? What's he, angry at? people generally, especially when you're new, they'll do just a dead face sculpt. So nothing bothers me more than seeing the Hulk like this and his face is, you know, and I'm like, who does that? Who smashes something with just, you know, like a nothing expression? I'm like, and that to me will make or break a sculpt. Like the facial expression, go extreme. Just go like, he should be like, ah, you know, and then you want to see like, oh, what's on the other side of that fist, you know? Or if he's afraid, you know, you want to know what's he afraid of. So, you know, put personality or attitude into your faces. That alone will make or break a sculpt. You can have the best looking anatomy, you know, for the entire rest of your sculpt, but if the face is just nothing, then, you know, it's just not interesting. You know, nobody's gonna compliment you on the awesome abs that you've done when he's got just a dead-eyed look in his face. So, you know, but going back for the eyes, yeah.
Cool.
So, and I've used lots of different materials. So I've jumped from, I started off with Sculpey. That's what I first started off with. And I liked Sculpey because it was easy to work with. It never dried out. And once you baked it, it just became like solid, like, you know, like a rock. And you could paint it and stuff like that. And then I started seeing online guys like Ray Villafane and Andy Burkholz and stuff who were doing amazing stuff with like wax. And I was like, oh, I got to get into wax. So I got into wax and I learned wax and I really enjoyed it, but the process is much, much slower. It's like you just, Sculpey it's a additive type medium, meaning that you just keep adding clay onto it, you build it up and stuff. Wax is a subtractive medium, so you have a basic form and you just scrape away and you keep like removing until you get what you want. I liked it a lot. I could get really good detail, but it wasn't fast. And when I was doing a big sculpt, I couldn't do it in wax. I was only doing like little heads and little hands in wax. Something big, you just couldn't do it that way. So so one of my friends, Walter O'Neill, who works for Sideshow now, he sent me this little head one time. It was a casting of like a Jonah Hex that he had done. And it was the most crazy detailed thing like I had seen in a long time. And it was this small, and it was done in Sculpey. And I was like, okay. I was like, obviously you can get whatever detail you want out of the material. You just got to be good enough and just practice. So I said, I'm going back to Sculpey. I'm just going to like keep pushing it. And so Mark Newman does, you know, most of his sculpts in Sculpey and stuff like that. And that's the point I'm at now. All the little mini busts in there, they're all done in Sculpey. And it's fast, it's quick, and anybody who says you cannot get the detail out of Sculpey that you can out of Monster Clay or CX5 or wax, they're full of it. It's completely not true. I can get better detail now with Sculpey, just like this, than I can with any other material that I work with. The only thing I'd say that, you know, you can get more is probably digital. And digital because you could zoom in and do like, you know, the pores inside of the pores, you know, so, but other than that, you know, it's a great material. You just have to practice with it. Just get better at it. Okay. Anybody else?
What is the digital tool they use?
ZBrush is the main one. ZBrush is the main one. There's a lot of like other things they'll use, like, you know, some people I've heard use like Mudbox and stuff like that. And I'm not. The funny thing is, I bought ZBrush when it first came out. I've had ZBrush since like, you know, 2007, 2008, 2009, something like that. I've updated. I have the latest version of ZBrush on my computer. I've never done a sculpt in ZBrush. I barely practiced because I don't have time. I want to, and that's part of my plan is moving forward with that. But any of the big companies that somebody's trying to get work with, ZBrush is the way to go. And it's a great tool. I've played around with it a little bit, but I'm just like, I don't have time. And it's like this. For me to get good at ZBrush, I know already that I'm going to need 2 years minimum to be decent. Just to be decent, not even like really good, you know? And I don't have that kind of time right now, but that's what I'm kind of working towards. My plan has been to eliminate the client stuff so that I've got more open time to work on things like that, to do my own stuff.
Is it true that once you do ZBrush, it's so like perfect because you're actually flipping one side to make the symmetry perfect, that you actually have to cut down on the symmetry to make it look more?
There's ways to turn it off. You can turn off the symmetry. So a lot of people will sculpt with it on, and then some people will just turn it off and do it like off. again, it's just like sculpting. It's just a tool. So, and it's all whose hands it's in. I know guys who leave the symmetry on who do crazy good work, and I've seen people who do the symmetry who are terrible. I've seen people who turn it off and are terrible, and I've seen people who turn it off who are good. It's whose hands it's in. So it really is. There's not a tried and true thing. There's not a So it really is. It just depends. Yeah.
Once you get your finished product in digital, how do you actually transfer to like the actual 3D images, like 3D printing?
Yeah. There's now more and more. It's one of those things that it's still pretty expensive. So like a lot of my clients will come to me, and I'm not cheap, but like a lot of the digital printers, by the time you pay the digital artist is cheaper than me. They can do it faster, and so they are cheaper than me. But then once you have to take that model, there's digital print houses now. They're starting to come up, okay? And it's almost like the microwave or the VCR. Like, when the microwave first came out and it was like $1,500 for a microwave, and then eventually it got to the point where it was like $70, you can get one. 3D printing's the same way. It's really expensive now, but it's the way of the future. The price is going to come down more and more and more, and at some point everybody will have a digital 3D printer in their house. You'll have one just like a computer. But that's what you do, is you send your file, you find somebody who does 3D printing, and they've got really massive, beautiful 3D printers, and they're pretty advanced. Disney has 3D printers that print pieces fully done in full color. So it's fully painted, it's completely done. And that's like the top level that you can get, but yeah.
So what would the price be for like a 1/6 scale, 1/4 scale?
Oh, I don't know. Because I haven't done 3D printing yet, so I couldn't even tell you. But there's plenty of guys here that I'm sure that have done it, and if you see one, ask them, and they can probably give you an idea. But I just know that it's still pretty pricey.
I have a question about your molding. Like, say you did your sculpture and you were satisfied with that. You put it in, you baked it, and say you had cracks. Do you deal with the cracks before you mold it, or do you mold it and then deal with the cracks?
No, I deal with it before I mold it and cast it. And that's another thing. So a lot of times with the Sculpey, another thing that I go over with the class and that I've got online and stuff is how to bake these so that they don't crack. Because the thicker the Sculpey is on your sculpt, the more likely it is to crack. Now, it doesn't crack like all over the place, but like you might get like one crack like down the center of the chest. A lot of times if you've got two big forms, like say the pectoral muscles, it's a lot of Sculpey there, and that area in between is kind of weak. So when you're baking it, it contracts and flexes and retracts, and that will make the crack of the center. When it comes out, you'll have that crack. You have to repair that with like epoxy putty. You can't repair it with Sculpey, because if you repair it with Sculpey and rebake it, it's just going to crack and re-crack again. So you've got to fill that in with epoxy putty and then kind of go over it and stuff like that. And that's the other thing that I showed the class yesterday too. In the class, I made a mold and a casting of a statue during the class just to show how easy it is. That if you do a sculpt, there's no reason that you can't do your own molding and casting. It's another thing that you have to learn, but it's really the basic principle behind it is super simple. It's just a matter of, get the materials, and you can start making copies of your own. And again, my daughter did that one time to raise some money for her school. She made a little statue of her school mascot. I showed her how to make the mold and stuff. She made a bunch of copies, and she sold them to like teachers and friends and stuff. And at the time she did that, I think she was 10. So I mean, so it's it's that easy. If my 10-year-old daughter can do it, then anybody can do it.
And why pay somebody else to do it when you can get
Right, and why not make? And why not? It's fun to make copies of like the statue that you made. You see a whole little line above them, and you're like, that's very cool, And starting off, I tell people the best thing to do starting off, you can buy little sample kits from Smooth On. That's right in there, and that's what I use. There's something called MoldStar 16 Fast, which I really like because it's super fast. It sets up in like an hour. And then they've got casting materials, resins that's set up in like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, it's ready to unmold in 10 minutes. I tell people, do magnets. Do little like flat magnets, like come up with like whatever you like, do faces, do it on a little board, and again, if you go onto the Patreon thing, I show you how to mold and cast. It's super easy, and the magnets are the easiest thing. My son made little magnets, and again, he's not the artist, my daughter is, but he joined in on our sculpting jam one time, and he did this little character, and it was Inigo Montoya from The Princess Bride, but it looked like it was done in Bob's Burger style, is what it looked like. And I was like, Tanner, I was like, you should do Star Wars characters in Bob's Burger style. I said, do them as little magnets. I said, I'll bet they would sell like crazy. So he did. He did Chewbacca and Han Solo, and he did them as little magnets, and we took them to Wonderfest last year and sold them like for $10 as a set. He did the molding and casting. He's the one who like sculpted them, and they sold like crazy. And now he's doing a whole little line of these like simple little magnets. So again, it's really easy, and that's a good way to start. And you know, like I said, you can get multiple copies. You can either sell them, give them away as gifts or whatever. But they're fun. They're easy to paint, and you could blow through a lot of them quickly. So, anybody else before we go? I mean, I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm not in any hurry, so. No?
Yeah,
Nobody
what's
else?
your phone number?
Huh? Yeah, up here. Yeah, everybody, when you come up, you can grab like one of these flyers that has like the website address, or get one of our cards, and just I'll put them up here on the table, and just feel free and grab one and stop by the table. Huh?
I came in a little bit late. What's the Patreon thing you're talking about?
And that's something that me and my partner Gannon have, where you come online. I've got so basically what we're doing is it's $25 a month, and that gives you access to our forum. And on the forum, we've got like exercises. We've got a lot of different sections. I've got over 14 hours of tutorials on there, and every other week I do a live sculpting video meetup where we get together. I give you a sculpting jam to do for 1 hour, and we all talk, and it's just like a fun get together for an hour. But the one thing that I'm offering is anybody who signs up here at the show for the Patreon, it's only $10 for this first month. And if you keep it going the next month, I'm going to be doing 3 exclusive mini busts like you see on the table, 1 Marvel, 1 DC, and 1 Monster, that only Patreon members can get. So I'll never sell it outside of Patreon. So like I said, the first month's $10, afterwards $25, but you get a $40 bust for $25, you know, and you can get stuff like that. But but it also gives you access. Once you sign up to the Patreon, it gives you access to me, because I'm happy to, especially for Patreon members, any questions that you have. You text me, you email me, something like that. And when I can't answer a question quickly, I'll often make like a short little video, like just say like, okay, here's what I do, blah, 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 and I'll send it right back to you. So it kind of gets you over the hump of any problems that you have while you're trying to, you know, learn sculpting and stuff. And then Gannon teaches illustration. He teaches how to be a better illustrator, and he's putting together a anthology comic book that everybody on Patreon, you can be part of. So once we put this comic together, if you have like a 3-page story or more, you can be included in this anthology. And he's got a book on the table like that he had done. It's a real comic, and it's got several different artists in it. But Patreon members can be part of this book that we're going to be putting out. So.
With all of the, you were saying about aluminum foil.
Yes.
The bulk. Do you have to recompress the aluminum foil for it to take shape?
Well, when I put it on, I build the armature, and I wrap the foil around it, and I push it on pretty tightly. Yeah, pretty tight. I mean, I don't make it like where I'm like struggling, but I push it on, and then I start putting my clay on. And, you know, and as I'm working it, if part of it is too thick, then I'll just like push it in with my thumb, or I'll take a hammer and I'll pound down the aluminum foil and, you know, just add more clay. So.
Do you have any issues like if you're cutting limbs for casting, like if it's aluminum based?
No, that's, once again, these are all like a lot of the stuff. There's so much information, like in the class yesterday, you know, like I gave them, Gannon looked at what I had to do, and he's like, how are you going to get through all of this? I basically showed everything that I do like in that time period, and it's a lot. So that's another part, is when you're cutting up a statue you can't mold and cast that piece that I've got out there as a whole piece. You have to cut it up into pieces. So when I did that Conan versus Gorilla, it was 50 different pieces. The arms were removed, the heads were removed, the hands were removed. Everything was a separate piece. And to do that for Sculpey, Like basically the way to do it, like to cut up something. So if I was to remove, like cast his head separate from this, once it's baked, what you do is you heat it up with a heat gun. And once it's pretty hot, then you just take an X-Acto knife and you just slice it. And it self-seals. So you slice it up to the point where you hit the internal wire or aluminum foil. So you slice all the way through, let it cool down, and then once it's cooled down, you've got that slice, you kind of rock the head back and forth a little bit, and then eventually it'll get loose enough that you can either go in there and snip the wire, or you can just pop it off. Now, once it's popped off, you kind of clean out the space where you had the foil, but if I put the head back on, you can't see the cut. Like it's almost invisible. So, so for all of my sculpt, pieces, I try to hide the seam as best I can, or like wherever you can't see it. And by doing it that way, instead of like, if you take a jeweler saw and cut it, you're gonna have that imperfection. And you can only kind of go at like weird angles. With the X-Acto knife, I mean, I can come down around his neck, I can really do it exactly where I want it.
But the hardest part is, I guess, with like say a female figure with not a lot of clothing on, like for the arms and stuff like that, that's the roughest part.
Yeah, and so with something like that, what you do is you cut it in an area where you know it's easy to repair. So like you would just go like around the bicep, like where this part, because then that's what I would do. Because if I did it up here more, then I've got to repair all this work under her armpit and stuff like that. But if I did it right here, once I put it back on, it's just a little bit of sanding and
Or you could put a bracelet or something.
Exactly. Well, if you got clothing, it's easy to hide. Yeah, but if it's just a completely like naked figure, then you've got to, be a little bit more. Yeah, think about that a little bit more.
Yeah.
So, anybody else? No. Cool. Thanks everybody for coming. I really appreciate it. You guys want to come up so I can just get a picture with the class, like from yesterday? Whoever's in the class yesterday.